Welcome to Advanced Clinical Formulation. Pop psychology often treats the unconscious mind as a single, settled concept. In reality, the foundation of depth psychology is a massive intellectual clash between three distinct frameworks. Sigmund Freud originated the structural model of the psyche, defining human motivation through biological drives and repressed history. Alfred Adler broke from Freud to pioneer a systemic psychology, focusing on the individual as an active agent embedded within a social context. Carl Jung expanded the map entirely, charting a collective, transgenerational unconscious filled with inherited symbols. Psychoanalysis is not a monolith. It is an ongoing debate over the teleology of human motivation, the ultimate why behind our behavior. This abstract split screen illustrates the three metaphors we will use to navigate these models: Freud's pressurized hydraulics, Adler's constructed architecture, and Jung's transformative alchemy. The central tension driving these models is a question of direction. Is a patient pushed blindly forward by past trauma, actively pulled toward future goals, or drawn deeply toward a collective spiritual wholeness? We will trace how these three paradigms dictate clinical functioning. We will compare their models of psychological development, their views on society, their methods for interpreting dreams, and how they structure the therapeutic encounter. Mastering these divergent teleological frameworks is a strict prerequisite for advanced clinical case formulation. You cannot treat a patient until you understand how their specific psyche is structured. Freud established a psychosexual deterministic baseline. He viewed the human mind as a fragmented battleground where primitive instincts constantly clash with social realities. This represents Freud's hydraulic structure, a closed pressure vessel with three chambers: the instinctual id, the rational ego, and the moral superego. When pressurized energy from the id is blocked, the valves lock. The resulting pressure warps the system, creating fixation and neuroses. Alfred Adler explicitly rejected this biological determinism. He argued that humans are not pressurized machines waiting to vent, but unified wholes striving for a purpose. In Adler's architectural model, the individual is a creative agent. This single node represents a person actively building their style of life, moving along a vector toward completeness. Fueled by childhood feelings of inferiority, the individual constructs an upward trajectory to overcome that deficit. Jung observed these models and concluded they were too narrow. He expanded the map of the psyche far beyond the personal, repressed unconscious. In Jung's grand synthesis, the psyche is mapped in layers. At the center is the conscious ego, surrounded by the personal unconscious of individual memories. Surrounding that is the collective unconscious, a vast outer ring and transgenerational repository containing inherited structures called archetypes. Jung defined the ultimate developmental goal as individuation, a lifelong process of achieving wholeness by integrating ancient, deeper layers with the conscious ego. Psychological development shifts dramatically across these thinkers, from biological pressure in Freud to conscious construction in Adler to spiritual integration in Jung. These internal maps dictate exactly how the psyche interacts with external civilization, social networks, and spirituality. For Freud, civilization is an unyielding boundary keeping our animal nature in check. Because direct instinctual release is blocked, pressure vents elsewhere. Religion is an illusion, and the arts are mere sublimation, primitive drives redirected into culturally acceptable sparks. Adler viewed social integration not as a hostile imposition, but as a biological and psychological necessity for human survival. Here, the individual is inherently embedded. Adler introduced social interest, an innate drive to contribute to a community network. Mental health is diagnosed by how successfully an individual navigates three interlocking life tasks: communal friendship, occupational contribution, and intimate love. Jung, meanwhile, elevated myths, alchemy, and religion from Freudian neuroses to vital expressions of the collective unconscious. This 17th century alchemical engraving maps the psyche's drive towards transformation. Jung recognized that the physical processes described by ancient alchemists were actually projections of psychological integration. Art and religious symbolism serve as a shared language. They bypass the rational ego to connect all of humanity to archetypal truths. Consider this Tibetan mandala. Jung saw these intricate, balanced, geometric structures across different global traditions as universal expressions of the mind's quest for structural wholeness. A patient's cultural and spiritual life is evaluated entirely differently depending on the clinician's framework. It is either a disguised defense mechanism for Freud, a metric of communal adaptation for Adler, or a sacred map for individuation for Jung. We see these teleologies collide most clearly in the clinical interpretation of a single phenomenon, the dream. This isolated teal cylinder represents a manifest dream image, the exact bizarre object the patient recalls upon waking. Freud posited that dreams are disguised fulfillments of repressed historical wishes. His framework requires the dreamer to look backward. Using free association, the analyst pulls the image through the mind's sensor, deconstructing the displacement to uncover the raw, latent thoughts beneath. Jung disagreed entirely. He argued that dreams are direct compensatory messages from the deep psyche, attempting to balance out blind spots in the waking ego. Instead of breaking the image down, the Jungian analyst uses amplification. They keep the symbol intact and expand it outward, connecting it to echoing cultural, social, and mythical themes. The dreamer is asked to look deeper. Adler dismissed Freud's reduction of imagery to sexual common denominators as organ jargon. He pulled the dream out of the deep unconscious entirely. For Adler, the visual content is secondary. The dream acts as a battery, generating a specific emotional mood state that the dreamer carries forward into the next day to tackle immediate interpersonal problems. The dreamer is asked to look forward. A dream has no singular objective meaning. Its value depends on whether the analyst intends to excavate the past, integrate the self, or navigate tomorrow. These differing philosophies dictate the physical and interpersonal setup of the therapy room itself. Freud engineered the therapeutic frame as a deliberate transitional space. By remaining out of sight and acting as a blank screen, the analyst triggers projection. The looping Mobius strip represents Freudian transference, a knowing illusion where the patient projects unresolved childhood conflicts onto the analyst. Analyzing this projected energy and the clinician's countertransference is Freud's core mechanism for resolving the unconscious. Adler and Jung discarded this hierarchical, illusory dynamic entirely. They shifted to a face-to-face, reality-based partnership. The analyst and patient look together toward a shared objective. Adler flattened the hierarchy, allowing the therapist to challenge private logic and encourage social courage, aligning their vectors toward practical tasks. Jung utilized this direct interaction for synthetic methods like active imagination, where the patient and analyst co-navigate the surfacing material of the collective unconscious together. The analyst evolved from a passive mirror designed to absorb personal history into an active co-pilot tasked with navigating teleological goals. Modern clinical practice does not require absolute loyalty to just one of these founders. Rigorous case formulation demands the integration of all three paradigms. Freud's hydraulics map our defense mechanisms. They force us to acknowledge how unresolved repressed histories continue to exert pressure on the present. Adler's architecture provides the tools for agency. It utilizes teleology and social interest to help patients build resilient, community-oriented lives moving forward. Jung's alchemy respects the profound depths of the human psyche. It provides a framework for integrating archetypal material and helping clients find spiritual meaning. Effective clinical formulation merges these frameworks: the pressure vessel for tension, the architectural grid for behavior, and the astrolabe for the spirit. Ignoring any pillar leaves a massive clinical blind spot in viewing the patient across from you. An effective clinician must possess the agility to look backward to drives, forward to goals, and deep into the shared human spirit.